Good evening, and welcome to another episode of Complimentary Cinema here on the O&M Stockroom. We're your hosts, Brian McGarry.
And Ken O'Malley.
And this evening, we're going to be talking about a interesting little film, TV movie from 2010 called Dinoshark.
That's correct. And how about you tell us a little bit about Dinoshark, just in broad terms?
So Dinoshark is Jaws with bad CGI, I think is probably the best way to describe it.
Now, when you say it's Jaws with bad CGI, does the film Jaws have a plot?
I have never seen Jaws.
But as far as your cultural understanding of the movie Jaws?
My cultural understanding of Jaws is that it was quite a fun and exciting film when it came out, and it was definitely iconic and classic. And I do believe it did, have a discernible plot.
You would say it includes characters.
I would say that it includes characters. It has acting. I know Roy Schneider is in it. I believe that's how you say his name, or Roy Scheider. He was in a bunch of stuff. He was in Sequest, Romeo's Bleeding. What else? He was in a few things.
I thought you were going to tell me what episode of Star Trek he was in.
I don't recall that he was in Star Trek, but he was in Sequest DSV,
okay,
which was like the underwater parallel to Deep Space Nine in the early mid-90s. And in fact, the action figures for Sequest were made by Playmates Toys, which also made the Star Trek figures, and as you may know, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
There's the connection.
So Jaws was a good, is considered to be a good film and whatnot. And I would say that this film currently has a rating on IMDb of 3.1 out of 10. Now, would you say that is a fair take on this film's performance?
I would not.
You would not?
I think that is aiming too high for this film.
3.1 is too high for this film, folks.
There was not enough fun in this film to receive that many stars.
Okay, so would you say it's a 2-star film?
I would say this is a 1.5 star film.
1.5 stars. I'm going to give it 2 stars.
What? Okay. Yeah.
So like on average, it'd be like what, 1 3/4 of a star?
Right.
Yeah. So why don't you give us a good little synopsis of this particular film? And for the viewers at home, yes, spoiler alerts. We love our spoiler alerts. We love to completely wreck this. Or actually, shouldn't we do the whole vital statistics things first?
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, let's do that. I'm jumping way ahead here because we just completely go by the seat of our pants every single week. So Dinoshark, directed by what was his name? Kevin O'Neill, a special effects guy. He did special effects visual effects rather, in Bram Stoker's Dracula and the Bruce Lee story, and a few other things. As far as his directing credits go, I think the most interesting title I saw was Attack of the 50-Foot Cheerleader.
Yeah.
And I believe the tagline for that was, "Look at the size of those pom-poms." That's
correct.
So that is certainly a contender for a future episode here on Complimentary Cinema. And so let's see here. So it came out in 2010. I believe the budget I read was $2 million. And I think probably all of that money probably went to the resort that they used to film this at.
Yeah, we'll talk about it a little bit when we get into it, but there's a lot of hallmarks of a low budget production here.
Many.
A lot of filming tricks and things like that to make it seem like they did more than they really did.
Absolutely. So some of the people in this film, we had the one actual actor, Eric Balfour. He was in the remake of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He was in 24, the show of 6 Feet Under. He's an actual bona fide working actor. I cannot say that for, some of the films set in Mexico. So you have some Hispanic Mexicans who work in Mexico, but not really in the U.S. But as far as like American actors, that was pretty much the one that we got out of that.
Yeah.
His main co-star was Eva Hasperger, not sure how you say that first name, a Croatian actress who studied here in the U.S., and her number one credit to her resume was Dinoshark, the film in question that we're talking about tonight.
This is her bright shining star.
This is her mark on the world, was this film.
And boy, what a mark it is.
What I know, right? So okay, and then I guess the genre for this, I mean, just general monster movie.
Yeah, monster movie. People talking to each other movie.
It's definitely a people talking movie with occasional monster, and certainly you could not call this a horror film or a suspense film by any stretch of the imagination.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. It's the violence is silly and not scary, and there's very little suspense, which are all the hallmarks of a good monster movie.
Indeed.
There's a lack of there's a lack of focus on action sometimes.
All right. Why don't we, before we get too ahead of ourselves, why don't you give us a little synopsis here?
Okay. So the movie is all about, of course, the Dinoshark. That is the namesake of the movie. It turns out that this is a prehistoric creature that was frozen in the Antarctic.
It appeared to be the Antarctic, yeah.
And so,
or not the Antarctic, the Arctic.
The Arctic, okay.
Yeah, the Arctic.
The ice was melting, and these things apparently have been stored in ice for a long time.
Little tadpoles.
For millions of years or whatever.
150 million.
So when they thaw out in the ice melting, then they just swim off out into the ocean. And we pick up the story 3 years after that. So it takes 3 years for them to turn from tadpoles into a full-grown Dinoshark.
And we see many, 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 many little tadpoles here.
Right.
But we only see, presumably, one Dinoshark in the actual film.
That's correct. They do mention a little bit in exposition. There have been sightings in other places in the world, so maybe that's where all those other ones went. But for the most part, we just have this one Dinoshark. It's really that Dinoshark story.
And they allude that climate change is what's to blame for the melting of the ice caps and the releasing of these terrible creatures upon the earth.
Right. So there's no moral gravitas to that aspect of the story, though. It's never really brought up other than a throwaway line.
It's a throwaway line for sure.
So it's kind of like everything else in this film. You could throw almost everything away.
Almost everything away.
So we see the Dinoshark grown for the first time, and it's apparently in Alaska, in the Gulf of Alaska, and it is attacking a diver.
A solo sailor.
Yeah, it's a solo sailor, but he's also diving just out in the middle of the water. The first thing that stuck out is that he is diving in the water where they're actually filming, because obviously they're not filming in Alaska. They're filming where the rest of the movie takes place, which is Puerto Vallarta in Mexico. And it's painfully obvious that this is not Alaska.
Absolutely not.
It's not cold. The background is the same. There's the same mountains in the background from his shots that you can see in later shots. Anyway.
Incredibly uniform topography.
So anyway, but yeah, basically just a guy on a boat, and he gets killed, and he's the first one to go.
Yeah, and then later on, we find, let's see.
Well, he ties in later, but the main thing to know is that when he dies, his his warning tracking beacon gets swallowed by the Dinoshark.
The Dinoshark.
That is the true purpose of this character.
Very handy. So let's. So from now on, I'm gonna refer to Dinoshark as Barney.
Okay.
So no. Barney the Dinoshark.
It needs to be Barney adjacent, like Barky.
Barky.
Barky. No. Barnabas the Dinoshark.
Barnabas. So that death happens, and they just kind of sweep it under the rug. It's the first example, I think, that we see of an action scene that just gets swept under the rug and quickly cut to a non-action scene.
Yeah.
Which is something we see often in this film.
This movie is allergic to showing action after two specific things happen. Two very specific things. The shark bites a limb, and then the shark bites the head. And after that, we cut away to the next scene.
And in this case, the next scene in this film is we get introduced to the main character of the film, a man named Trace, who looks like he just looks like your typical American tourist, but apparently he grew up in that area in Mexico and knows the people and knows the layout of the land and is a boat captain of sorts.
Yeah, so apparently he works for they jokingly call him the Fortune 500 captain because apparently he captains all the rich people's boats, either get them from one place to another or for the season or whatever.
And so he shows up at his buddy's bar, Luis's bar, and he meets some other friends. A guy named Steve, lady named Rita, beautiful blonde lady named Carol, who was played by our Croatian actress. And the first thing that really jumped out at me in this scene is not just the mind-numbing exposition that they're delivering at this point. It is the bad dubbing of the vocal takes. Everything was slightly off kilter, and I noticed this throughout the film. Most of the outdoor scenes with our main actors are actually recorded, I think, on site, but almost all of the interior shots are definitely overdubbed.
Yeah.
And there's serious, once you notice it, you can't unnotice it.
And the scenes are super uneven. In some scenes, it's and then some of the exterior scenes then, because the ones in the boats and stuff are really terrible too. It's just sometimes it's passable and sometimes it's just they're either saying different things or the timing is completely different from what their lips are moving.
It definitely gets much, much worse with some of the random extras that they kind of throw in.
Yeah.
Where there's just no alignment whatsoever.
Because the main cast isn't that bad outside of that first bar scene.
Yeah.
That's definitely the worst one for the main cast.
Yes, but there's a family of 3 later on that we see, and it looks like they just had him just say any old thing, and then they decided later on that they were just going to have him just say whatever it was that they had written.
This looks like a clear-cut case of the good enoughs.
Oh, absolutely.
We got to take in, move on to the next one.
And by good enoughs means no budget for an extra take.
Right.
So our hero Trace, which is a really, really, really stupid name. He's making his rounds with his buddies, letting them know how everything's going. Gets his other boat. Meets an old friend who's now a cop. Just a lot of completely mind-numbing exposition that doesn't really go anywhere other than to introduce future dead people.
That's really all it is, because even the people they meet and they talk to and they talk about things, none of it matters, none of it's important, and none of it's relevant.
Correct. So after he meets his people, pretty much literally within the first 20 minutes, one of this main group of 5 that he seems to be close with, a lady named Rita, decides to go swimming. And Rita is, I believe, the first, I guess she's the second one to die after our Alaskan sailor.
Yeah, there was another person that died right then too.
Was there?
Yeah, because there was the other boat. There was another boat nearby. That's why the emergency patrol was out.
Oh, that's right.
That one boat went down, and then they went after the swimming girl.
Truthfully, the body count in this film is so high. I wish I had kept count.
Honestly, it's staggering, and the elected officials in this town don't seem to have any care at all.
Especially since it's a resort town, and you would think that they'd want to not have such a catastrophe blemish their reputation.
Well, even the people who are visiting don't notice. People are dying in this town. It's apparently on the news, and it's not stopping anyone from going to the beach. We see packed beaches.
Ken, we're in the midst of a global pandemic, and it has not stopped any of these people from Well, it's not stopped many people from going about their lives perfectly, typically, you know?
I guess I have too much faith in people.
You have way too much.
Yeah.
Yeah, take that down from like maybe to a 90 to like a 6, and you'll be a little more on par there.
Okay. So anyway.
So anyway.
So it's funny, too, because typically we'll kind of, talk a little bit about things as we see them, try to make little predictions and stuff like that. And when I saw this character at the bar, I was like, oh, she's going to make it. Like, she's going to be the one that's around for a long time.
She had that vibe.
And then she just gets eaten.
Just immediately. Yeah. And one of my favorite parts about when she does get eaten is, it goes without saying that all of the effects in this film are dreadful. It's a $2 million budget film made by a whole lot of nobodies. And there's terrible, terrible CGI in this flick. About as bad as it gets. And my favorite part of this is pretty much every time Dinoshark kills someone, you see like a blur going for the legs. And then you'll see like another like puppet, like kind of just gnawing on the neck. And then at least a couple of times afterward, my favorite part, it just kind of does a little flip out of the water. Like it's all happy it just ate.
It looks very much like a dolphin that's jumping, like playing and having fun.
Excitedly, just like, ooh, I just made another kill. 10 points for me.
It got a hearty laugh out of me the first couple times that happened. And then I was really just hoping it would keep happening.
I really wanted that to keep happening too. That would have been a highlight of this film for sure.
Yeah.
But alas, the motif did not continue.
Of all the things they were consistent about, that was not one of them.
That was not one of them. So a short time later, after Rita dies, our two main characters here, Trace and Carol, they meet up and they're talking about, more exposition, blah, blah, blah. And then there's another scene, which, they give the impression that this is the same day. And they're wearing different clothing. And for this one scene in this entire film, Trace has like pretty much a full beard, and his hair looks a good half-inch longer.
Yeah. So here's what happened with that. They had their filming schedule. They shot everything else. And then they decided to film that scene because they're like, we need another scene of our characters talking about like their past or like their history or just anything. We just need another meaningful scene to put in here to break up the time. And they'd already stopped filming, so these actors were just being on the beach for like a week or two. And they were like, oh no, we need to film a little bit more. So they called the guy back and they just filmed him just like that and didn't cut his hair,
nothing. Like nothing. It's a huge
they're wearing different clothes, like you said. His facial hair and everything's completely different and super noticeable.
It's super noticeable. Like he doesn't even look like the same guy.
Because most of the film, he has this facial hair that's like very light. It's very little, but there's just like he's got a little fuzz.
Yeah. It's very short, almost like a 5 o'clock shadow, but styled.
Yeah, like
contoured,
like a 5 o'clock the next day shadow.
Yeah, and then in this scene, this guy's got like a full at least 2 weeks. Also contoured and shaped.
Mm-hmm.
And styled, not just grown out.
Yeah,
incredible stuff. So that was a fun one, and that kind of got me noticing some of the other wardrobe malfunctions. There's another. So let's talk about the gratuitous ass scenes.
Yes,
there's at least a couple of those.
So that started with the first swimmer that died, and when she took off her regular clothes, she was wearing her swimsuit under it. The camera just 80% of the screen is butt.
Just butt.
It's just butt as she's walking down to the water. And that's it. It's just full butt and then she's in the water.
There was no pretense to even make it like an establishing shot of what she was doing. It was completely gratuitous.
I'm honestly surprised we didn't get more of that later on in the film.
I am too, actually.
Because we didn't get any of that at the beach or anything like that.
No, we really didn't because they were filming mostly people who were tourists there.
So I don't know if that was intentional or what, but that they really stood out in that first time.
I'm pretty sure that was intentional. May not have been intentionally well done, but it was definitely intentional. There's another scene too when the guy Steve, a random guy you meet once, has 2 lines of dialogue, and then they kill him.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he picks up this attractive young woman. He takes her to his place. He's well off. He's got a nice spot. She's like, ooh, So she's wearing a swimsuit underneath some clothing. And when she takes off her outerwear, the camera does a ridiculous, completely slowed down, all the way down pan of her body, and then slowly all the way back up.
It's really stands out. Those two are...
That second one actually made me a little uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like somebody actually filmed that, and then they decided like, oh, we need to keep that.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That was pretty terrible. And so going back, there was a third example of a gratuitous scantily clad woman shot. Carol goes, talks to Trace about God knows what at this point.
Well, the background for her is that she's science lady.
She's science lady.
She knows about some kind of marine science stuff.
He was also like a water polo captain, apparently, or coach.
Yeah, I don't know what the relation is there.
It's just squeezed in.
But anyway, she's like science lady, so she knows about. She does research on these dinosaurs, these dinosaur sharks. After they have the suspicion that that's what these are, and so she is like doing research on her computer, looking very intensely at it, and then just by herself. This is just a scene of her looking at a computer screen. It's very thrilling.
On fake Google.
Fake Google. Great stuff, just reaction shots of her looking at a computer screen. And then when she finds the picture and when this prehistoric dinosaur shark comes on the screen, she gets a really concerned look on her face and then stands up and takes her shirt off and then walks off camera.
And then naturally that just pans to a completely new scene where we're back at the boat docks, and we see Trace again, and we see Carol again, and she's wearing. Here's the funny part. So she was wearing like a spaghetti strap black shirt earlier in the day, and then in the scene at home, she's wearing like a thicker black shirt, and now she's back in the spaghetti top.
Yeah, it's like a tank top.
Yeah, like very inconsistent wardrobe. And facial hair in this film.
But she changes wardrobe like 4 times that one day.
Because by the time she goes I think by the time we see her in front of the computer, it's nighttime. And that's the first night scene that we ever get.
Yeah. Really the only.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Those were shot later.
Definitely.
So they were like, we need to get a different time of day in this movie. It's all in the middle of the bright sunshiny day.
Yes.
That's the other thing too, is like, obviously it's shot in somewhere that's pretty, like to begin with, like it's a pretty place. So a lot of that isn't terrible as far as like the stuff they just shoot for backgrounds, and like the look of this location is nice just by inherently. They don't really have to do anything. But then they don't do anything with it other than shoot some like local people and stuff like that.
There is a lot of establishing shots of local people. There is, like you see a lot of boaters. You see, I mean, you see, so from being in Mexico, an incredible number of white tourists are all over this. And you've got like white American police. You've got white American Coast Guard types. Almost, it seems like this town, I can't say it, Puerto Vallarta, they're all 95% just regular white Americans.
Yeah.
Who live and work and are tourists there.
The very few times that you see actual Mexican people in this movie this whole movie also takes place at a resort, and it's the people who actually work at this resort that they're just filming as part of the movie.
I'm nearly certain of that. So this was filmed at the Paradise Village in Mexico is the name of the resort. And we have since learned that they actually, the cast and crew actually stayed at this resort.
Right.
And it's easy to see why. I mean, there's even a scene where you see some a mariachi band of sorts playing. And maybe you could call this a little world building scene. But one scientist guy is talking to another scientist guy, and the band's playing kind of loud. And then main scientist guy, who's portrayed by Roger Corman, the fantastic B-movie director and producer. He goes over to the mariachi band and compliments them on their music and then asks them to play just a little quieter. And I had to stop for a moment, like, what the hell was the point of that scene?
Just so they could go up to the mariachi people and get a close-up shot of them.
We'd already gotten a close shot of them playing, but we needed another one just to tell them that, oh, you guys are great, but not that great. Can you keep it down just a smidge so we can talk?
I don't know why they bothered developing any of those characters, because none of them mattered at all.
All of them could have been cut from the film. It must have been favors. Just doing favors for each other. It's
other people that were staying at this hotel, like, I want to be in your film.
Like, the budget was $2 million, right? So, like, maybe every time they found a tourist, they're like, hey, if give us like $150, we'll give you a scene in our movie.
Maybe that could have been on the spot crowdfunding.
I mean, it's Mexico. People are on vacation. They're a little loose with their money. Maybe little unscrupulous things maybe occurring, a little under the table payments, perhaps.
Makes sense, but you're probably right. It's probably just people who they owed favors to, or that kind of thing. Producers, wife, and whatever. Like
there's one shot of like an older couple just sitting, enjoying a little dance performance. It's like maybe that was the director's like in-laws. Maybe he just gave them a really bad turkey for Christmas one year. And they just, he had to make up to it somehow. I was like, hey, I'm directing the film of the summer, Dinoshark.
Yeah.
And you can have a spot in my film. Just smooth things over with the in-laws.
Yep. So anyway, we got a little bit off track, but it's a kind of a little bit of an overview of how this movie really is. It's a lot of people that don't matter. Some that we introduce for a reason to kill later. Some that we introduced, it ends up being for no reason to do a little world building. The mostly also noticeable like old science guy, who is actually the producer,
Roger Corman,
yep. Right? His job is to examine the DNA to verify that this creature is in fact the Dinoshark.
And how did he do that?
He put it in a microscope and then put that somehow in the computer, and the computer made a 3D picture from it.
It was pretty incredible how that happened too. Where did he get the DNA from though, Ken? Do you remember?
Oh, it was that the emergency beacon from the Arctic, the first kill of the film.
Alaska guy.
Yeah, Alaska guy.
Yeah, apparently he just swallowed the entire damn ship, including the emergency beacon, and then swam with it all the way to Mexico, where he regurgitated it. That was quite a leap in events there.
Yeah.
That was amazing that they came up with that.
Yep.
That was the most convoluted way possible to provide DNA for the scientists to examine in this film.
And it was literally like the puke in his DNA on this regurgitated capsule. So, yeah. And of all the pieces of the boat that he would have to regurgitate, because he couldn't digest any of it, somehow the capsule survived the whole process and the trip and all this.
Yeah, this GPS transponder survived just fine.
Not to mention, they mentioned the transponder's water activated and whatever. Well, it was in the water the first time, and apparently it never went off. And I mean, you would be able to track it the whole way with this shark swimming, theoretically.
You would think.
So anyway, they don't explain that either, but
that's just you just sweep that under the rug.
Yeah.
All right. There's close-ups of butts to be had here. All right. We can't waste all this time with thinking, Ken.
My other problem with all of this is they spend time with people talking to do exposition, and they really have no character at all. All of the people in this movie are blank people just moving from one plot point to the next. They don't have any personality at all.
None.
The main character isn't even like that likable, but he's not dislikable. He's just like this guy that goes in a boat, and he's a boat captain guy.
If I went into 7-Eleven and I needed a Slurpee, Ken, I would trust that this boat captain would do a great job of ringing me up for that Slurpee, and that's about as much emotional attachment as I have to his character or any other character in this film.
Yeah.
Now Rita, the first death of this little friend group. They talk about how like, oh, it was Carol's best friend from here, quote unquote, meaning she wasn't really her best friend, just her best friend in Puerto Vallarta. And then Trace, our boat captain, talks about how he was a poor kid growing up, even though his dad was in the Navy, even though he studied at Annapolis for a year. He was the poor kid growing up, and Rita would bring him an extra lunch just for him. And that brought up a really wonderful little line of dialogue. I believe Trace said it was the first time he ever had food made with love.
Oh God, yeah. Yeah, that was terrible.
That was pretty cringe. That was way up there.
That was the closest we got to any emotion in this film.
They at least they made some kind of an effort to emotionally involve us in some of these people on screen, but it failed terribly.
But they did it with two people that don't have any personality, just speaking words to each other.
Like two mannequins having a heart-to-heart would be probably as captivating, as enthralling. Actually, more so because it would be mannequins, actual lifeless objects, not two actors portraying lifeless objects.
Now, I had a pretty good suspicion that once it turned out that we had the main guy and the main girl, that neither of them were going to die in this film. I kind of had a suspicion of that as we continued on. But most of the rest of the film I spent anticipating everyone dying because I was just ready to move on and get to the next time that someone was going to die.
Which you didn't have to wait long for, because this Dinoshark has got to be the most goddamn bloodthirsty animal I have ever seen. There's one scene where the shark jumps out of water and nabs a jet skier and goes into the water. And I counted it. 2 seconds of screen time later, the shark is coming up through the water to nab a parasailer.
Yeah.
2 seconds.
Yeah. And it was coming up from like the depths.
The depths. Like, that is an incredibly fast, incredibly hungry shark. Why is the shark so hungry, Ken?
Now let's talk about that for a minute, about the shark being hungry. Because when this shark kills people, it tears them apart, but it does leave parts around.
A lot of parts. There's torsos.
We see legs, torsos, heads being left behind. It's not even doing a great job of eating them. It's doing a very efficient job of killing them. But it doesn't even do a great job of eating them.
It's doing a great job of like just taking like it's like when somebody like gets pizza and just eats like a few of each slice and then like leaves the rest in the box like a dickhead.
That's a great analogy.
That's kind of like the shark. And that kind of made me think of something else here. So early on in the film, when Trace takes over the boat, we find out that the guy he's taking the boat from is like maybe smuggling some marijuana or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Later on, some harbor detective inspector finds more marijuana in the boat. And so marijuana comes up at least a couple of times in this film. And it makes me wonder, did the Dinoshark come to Puerto Vallarta for pot? Was he getting a little bit of Buddha smoke going? Was he just having insane munchies? And that's why he just cannot seem to get enough blood in his mouth.
He's got prehistoric level munchies.
He's got prehistoric level munchies. He was frozen in ice for 150 million years. Okay? And as soon as he was old enough, which I guess is 3 years, it's like, all right, I'm gonna go to Mexico. I'm gonna get some marijuana. I'm gonna eat some fine women and men and children and anybody
boats.
else and boats. And in one scene, a helicopter.
Yeah.
The worst CGI helicopter I have ever seen.
Yeah. Yeah, we can talk about that too.
Can we?
So, this scene would have been better off with someone flying an RC helicopter that they strapped a firework to. That would have looked more convincing.
It would have. Well, it would have. what's incredible, so many times, like, okay. So Kevin O'Neill, the director of this film, visual effects artist, has done at least a couple of big Hollywood films, has done a whole lot of B films. Now, you would hope that somebody with a background like that would be competent in that field, and that would have, maybe some really good know-how on how to pull off effective, convincing effects on a shoestring budget. What we get here, many, many times, you get the worst fake blood splatter. You get helicopters and explosions that are completely flat against the background that they're transposed over. And most of the time that we see Dinoshark, we just see the fin, because animating the whole part of it just would have been too expensive, I suppose. And there was one scene in particular where the fin is going into the water, and it had the worst, jerkiest effect going in.
The water, because they kind of animate the water just right around the fin. They don't add a wake to the water in general. They just add little splashes around the fin. So that stands out a lot. They didn't add an awake effect behind it. And then, like you said, when the fin goes underwater, the splash effect kind of goes on for another second or like two.
Very jerkily, too.
And yeah.
And then it's gone.
It looks real bad.
It's as bad as CGI as you can get. I mean, this might be the worst film that we have reviewed so far.
I will say the CG, as bad as it was, and the Deep Shock movie, I mean, I guess they had the benefit of being all underwater, so they didn't have to worry about surface of water. But this one spent a lot of time looking at the surface of water, and you can't really get that wrong.
You really can't. And I also want to say, like Deep Shock, which we did a couple weeks ago, they actually built sets for that movie.
That's true.
They actually had costume designers for that film.
Yeah.
They even put fake boxes over the computer screens to make them look fancy.
Mm-hmm.
This film had none of that production budget at all.
I mean, the best thing this movie had was boats.
And it did have a lot of boats, and it had a lot of tourists.
Yeah.
And it had lots of life vests and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, and alcohol bottles in the bar scene. There is a lot of liquor bottles behind that bar.
That's true.
There's at least 30 or 40.
Well, because that was just a regular bar they went in to film that in.
How many pesos do you think they paid the owner? It's like, hey, can we film here for 2 hours?
Maybe it was a deal like we'll stay around and buy drinks afterwards.
Oh, yeah.
We'll be patrons after.
Ooh. We'll be patrons. We'll film in your bar. The bar will be featured in the film, and we'll buy some drinks.
Yeah.
And maybe some appetizers.
I mean, that's obviously the resort. They have a similar kind of deal going because
absolutely.
The name of the actual resort is shown. It's said several times in dialogue. It's shown in a positive light at every turn because they keep showing these dancers that work there, the musicians, all this
It looks like a very well run joint. However, there is the skeezy resort owner who's trying to get Carol to do a job there, and he walks in and she's a coach for water volleyball. And he goes into the girls' locker room, and they kind of get grossed out. He has a very Donald Trump moment where he's like, "Oh, I own this place, whatever."
That's true.
That would be the one negative aspect of this film, and I didn't do enough research. Maybe that actually was the actual resort owner.
They don't really dwell on that though, and honestly, I think it's more from our perspective. He's real skeezy. He's not as skeezy, I think, from a neutral perspective.
Yeah, I guess this is 2010 when this was filmed. We're in a bold new era now, 2020. We're holding people accountable now for skeezy actions.
Our woke quotient is pretty high.
It is pretty high. It wasn't as high back in 2010. I mean, they were still using flip phones.
Yeah.
There's a great shot.
It didn't even flip, man. That was just a brick phone.
Yeah, there was a couple of flip phones in there, but there was a great close-up of a Nokia brick phone, which definitely looked like it had seen better days.
Yeah, it was well worn.
That was definitely a cast or crew member's cell phone just shot up close, which you have to appreciate that level of realism and detail.
Yeah. I mean, that is the thing that since they did everything monster whatever related was all CGI, computer effects. There was literally no practical effects for anything, hardly any props. There was the boats and the Jeep. There was one Jeep. And that's really about it. Everything else in the background in this film is just what was already there that they're shooting. You know, people in the street, cars in the street, boats in the water. They have nothing to do with this production. They're just already there because of the location.
They're just filmed by accident and made to look like they're part of the production.
Yep.
Which I have to admit, if we were ever going to make a really awful movie, Ken, we have learned a couple of little tricks.
Well, yeah, definitely. I mean, you film your movie at the state fair, you know?
Absolutely.
You film your movie on the day there's a boat parade, you know? Every little trick you can do to get, you know.
Build that world.
They record a lot of people dancing events and stuff like that. And it is a little bit jarring. They go back and forth between the cinema quality cameras and hand cams.
The cinematography. Yes, let's talk about that. So the opening shot, you know, you have Arctic scenes of icebergs and such and ice breaking. And it's like National Geographic quality film. And then that immediately goes to crappy underwater CGI and then to just regular quality film for this production when you see the Alaskan sailor. And then in other parts when they're in Mexico, like you have like really good film quality, like in the bar scene. And then in another scene, you get a close up of Rita. She's driving and it looks like a GoPro, like a crappy GoPro.
Yep. Yeah. They filmed a lot of the stuff that's just out in the town on just a handycam.
Yeah.
Handycam.
Yeah. Just absolutely small, low resolution,
and it's
cameras.
Super jarring because also the frames per second isn't consistent
at all.
And so yeah, those little shots, they didn't really need it. I mean, I guess they just wanted to establish like just the town, but they could have had some stationary shots instead of trying to do these action shots.
Oh, absolutely.
Of just people going by or something, you know.
One of my favorites with the cinematography is a couple of times when they needed close-up shots, they didn't actually film a close-up shot. They just took a normal shot and then just zoomed in on that to make it look like a close-up shot. And my favorite part of that was when everything was soft and out of focus.
And the one that you noticed, I think, the most was the little boy.
Little boy, later toward the end of the film. Yeah, that was a great one because
just like a horrified look on his face.
Because when I want a close-up shot, Ken, I want it soft, I want it out of focus, and I want it just slightly blurry.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I want.
Yep, it's real quality.
Perfect. So I mean, this is a quality film for sure.
Another interesting kind of dip in quality, or something that's super noticeable to me right away, was whenever anyone goes underwater, when we got the underwater effects shots mixed with the real people, all of those shots are shot in a pool, so you're seeing everyone's feet and everything from below. And then the camera goes back up above the water and the water's like brown. Like the water's like not clear water. And then we go back underwater and it's this pool, blue, clear water. And at a couple points in time, I could see the wall of the pool.
You could just make out the rim of like where the top of the wall was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing I liked too was in another underwater scene, I think, in like a swampy kind of area, there was a whole lot of CGI bubbles thrown in to kind of break it up and mask where they were actually filming underwater.
Yep, that was another hallmark with the effect shots and the people swimming, is they added a bunch of fake grain and kind of bubbles and stuff to mask the fact that it was just a clear pool.
Now, CGI should always be used for effect shots that you just cannot pull off physically. And I still think that that's true even for this film. Like you were saying, a radio-controlled toy helicopter would have looked better than the fake chopper explosion they had.
Yep.
And by God, a hand puppet in a bathtub would have been more convincing and probably have looked better and had more emotional impact than the two-dimensional CGI Dinoshark that we see.
Now, I know that they couldn't have afforded to make it look good, so I'm sure that's why. I mean, and if this guy was just a digital effects guy, I'm sure that's just, like I said, everything else in this production is just, okay, the effects will be good enough. We'll add them in later. It'll be fine. But especially the stuff with the helicopter, that was not good enough.
It really wasn't. And I really feel for the actors in this.
Like, you could have inserted a helicopter scene from a video game and it would have looked better than what's in this.
A video game from like 1995.
Yeah, from this era.
like an original PlayStation helicopter would have looked just fine. I really feel bad for the actors and actresses in this film. Because you can just see, like, so many of them were like excited to work. They're like, oh my God, I'm in a movie. I'm in Mexico. It's kind of campy, but whatever. Like, you can see, like, especially on Carol's face, you can just see it. She's really giving it her all. She's really trying. She's like, oh man, this could be my big break. But instead, they're in Dinoshark. And it was the end of at least a few people's careers, from what I can tell.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the perk at least is they were in Mexico, so that's nice. You know, at least they had that going for them.
They probably got some free drinks.
Yeah, free drinks. You know, some that obviously room and board at this resort.
I'm sure the food was killer.
Yeah, so they had that. They had at least a nice week or however long it took to film this.
Maybe 2 weeks.
Yeah,
I give it 2 weeks.
Yeah,
you know, like 1 week per hour of film or so. I mean, it was 90 minutes, but you know.
I guess it depends on if you count the reshoots. Apparently, they added stuff on. They're like, oh,
at least one scene.
I know we cut you loose and you've been just living in paradise for like a couple extra days, but we need you to come back and film this one scene where you just talk to each other about stuff that doesn't matter.
That's not going to have any impact in the film.
It's just it doesn't inform the characters at all. There's no reason it's important for the main character other than the fact that he drives boats, which he'll do throughout the movie.
That scene was intended to give them... That scene was intended to bond our two leads and give them something in common in the loss of Rita. Like, that was the function of that scene, but it just doesn't work.
But to tell me, why did they need to bond? What was the purpose of the bond? To make them to put them on common ground, to give them a common cause in continuing the plot of this film, which is uncovering the death of Rita and then exacting revenge. We didn't really talk about him too much, but the bartender ends up being another half major character.
We see him a couple of times in the bar, and then he has
he tags along.
He tags along for a little bit toward the end of the film. Yeah. Until he also gets wasted.
Yeah, it turns out, though, that he's got a military connection, so he provides them with ordnance. So he has grenades and a RPG launcher and
multiple RPGs for that.
Yes.
And the most insulting part of this film was his complete lack of trigger discipline.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, he was aiming right at the Dinoshark, and it went underwater, and another boat came along, so he couldn't fire, and he just kept that finger on the trigger, and he was waving it around, and
with his finger on the trigger,
he drops it or puts it down or something on the ground.
Very, very sloppily.
It was disappointing. He could have put an eye out.
He easily could have put an eye out. I mean, do you think that RPG was spring loaded?
I mean, it wouldn't have been just an eye. It would have been an eye and a finger and a whole rest of the body.
Yeah, possibly. Oh, and there was a great you get at some point in the film, I can't even remember, maybe toward the end, there's a quick glance of some of the grenades that he got, which are very clearly made out of plastic. Yeah, which I thought was great.
And the actual RPG holder itself was made out of just like pipes and like random things they picked up from a junk heap.
It was like almost like kit bashed, you know. Yeah. I mean, if you don't look at it closely, it looks fine. Yeah. Same with the grenades. Like, they just flash them on screen just long enough for it to register like, oh, those are grenades.
Right. I know what it is. You don't.
But when you actually pause it and look at it, they're cheap crap. I mean, like they probably got them at like dollar store, like Army Playtime set.
No, it was long after the helicopter had already crashed, so I already knew how bad the effects were. But I was really super disappointed the first time that a grenade exploded, because once again it was these 2D explosion that doesn't even go with the background. It had no interaction with water. They didn't even put a water splash in it. This grenade just like is a 2D explosion effect. Not even a fake seismic shock or anything.
I'm not even sure how I would describe it. It was just a
2D picture.
It was like an orange flash.
Yes.
That just kind of smeared around.
We cut back to the other shot of the boat going along with no no residue from the explosion. So I knew it was going to be bad, but it was really bad.
And that, friends, is our take on Dinoshark.
Is that it? Is that all we have?
What else can we possibly say about this film?
Were none of your other notes relevant?
I think I've mentioned all of my notes. I mean, the use of stock footage.
Yeah.
Lots of shots of tourists.
Yeah.
The dubbing. Oh. So a note about the dubbing, especially in that first bar scene. If you just listen and just close your eyes, the dubbing sounds like a radio drama from like the 40s or 50s. Everything is incredibly well enunciated and very enthusiastically told.
Mm-hmm.
Like it sounds like they really are doing a radio show and not interacting in a room.
The dialogue really feels like it too.
Oh, absolutely.
So even just the writing for it before they even recorded it, it just feels very wooden.
Oh, very wooden and very just artificially delivered.
Yeah.
I can't believe that this thing happened. What do you mean?
Oh boy, it's been so long since we've seen each other.
Boy, sure glad to have you back. I mean, like that was the quality of that overdubbing in that first bar scene.
That is true.
Well, let's see. Yeah, I think I've covered all of my notes here, Ken. What would we say is the probably the best performance in this film?
I would say our main character. He's definitely he stands out as someone who knows what he's doing at least. And although his character isn't strong, he is the likable, boat captain guy. So I think he probably did the best, I would say.
With what he had to work with, yeah, he did pretty good. Yeah. Well, now what about worst performance?
Worst performance is probably the old creepy guy.
Old creepy guy?
Oh,
yeah, he was pretty bad. I can't remember what his name was.
There's got to been a worse one than that, though. Oh, the dad. The dad from the little kid and the mom, like, and his voice was so off.
Yeah. The extra.
Like, he was a bad actor in addition to the dialogue being bad.
His body performance was pretty poor, too.
Yeah.
And I think probably the most over-the-top performance was... we haven't really talked about him, but his name is Calderon. He's basically like the lead annoying cop of this harbor area. And he gets very excited and loves to shout his dialogue and is very clownish.
Way too animated.
Way too animated, especially when, like, if the whole film was at that level, okay, but they're not.
Yeah, it's not supposed to be funny.
So he really clashes out, and his role could almost be taken comedically.
Yeah, they play the rest of the movie straight, and then he kind of gets too big with it.
Yeah, so that was a pretty lousy one. Soundtrack and score. So we had a lot of like stuff that sounds like it came from like the YouTube audio library. Just yoinked out some generic pop music, some super generic rock music toward the end, and oftentimes at complete odds with the mood or the vibe of the scene that we're watching.
And everything that's soundtrack-ish is derivative as far as you started kind of humming, the things it was kind of based off of.
Oh, yeah. Like they definitely do a riff on the Jaws theme. They kind of riff on the Terminator scene a little bit. Mm-hmm. Like there's like dun 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 dun. You know, a lot of that. Very artificial and generic. But, for a TV movie with a budget of $2 million, what do you expect?
It stood out to me, too, that like in the scene near the end where we've had like you had this suspenseful shark music, and then like a boat full of people has just been killed, and a child's parents have been eaten in front of him, and then when the hero right after this moment, the hero gets on a jet ski And then the music all of a sudden is like, yeah, let's do this.
Yeah,
It was very inappropriate.
It was incredibly inappropriate, and it's supposed to be our hero's big moment right after this child is orphaned.
Like that's the sound, that's the music you put on in a movie where it's where the main character just got in a boat to go win the boat competition, or like, go have fun with his friends, go to a race. Not the one where like the shark just ate people and now you need to blow it up. That's the wrong kind of music.
So what's funny to me, so I'm sure you're familiar with the expression "jump the shark."
Yeah.
Stemming from the old Happy Days episode where the Fonz it's on a jet ski or what? I can't remember the actual episode, but he's
water skiing.
He's like water skiing. Yeah, thank you. So he's water skiing and he goes over a shark and he's wearing a leather jacket, and Happy Days was just kind of ridiculous after that. That show jumped the shark.
Yeah.
With that episode, this movie is the shark jumping.
Yeah.
Over and over and over again, and I'm sure that was some little inside joke with the people who made this.
Yeah.
It had to have been.
Well, we pretty much laughed every time that the shark got involved with eating people.
Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah.
You just can't take it seriously.
You can't take anything seriously.
Yeah.
Not the acting, not the effects.
But like the rest of it's not funny as far as like.
It's not intended to be a comedy.
But even the other parts with the human people, they aren't really funny. Like even unintentionally funny.
Yeah.
It's just people talking to each other about stuff.
Like what was so this film came out around the time of like Giant Shark and Mega Octopus or something. Like, a notoriously bad film that was definitely, not taking itself seriously. And this is not that kind of film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like it's kind of cashing in on the overall vibe, but not that comedy angle.
Right.
So what would your final score and recommendation for this be, Ken?
My final score, as you might remember from the beginning of when we talked about this.
Well, now that we've talked about it for an hour.
Now that we've talked about it, my opinion has not changed at all.
No?
No.
Still just 1.5 stars?
Yeah, there's just not enough there as far as like, okay, so the effects are bad. The prehistoric shark thing isn't really that exciting or interesting, and the characters are non-existent. So how can I give it any more than that? It's a pretty place they shot it in, and there's a lot of pretty backgrounds and interesting cultural representations and boats. It's fun to watch people ride around in a boat. That's about the best parts of this movie.
The entire time I was watching this film, I wanted Jose Cuervo and to go hang out on a beach.
Yeah.
And just slightly annoyed that it happens to be wintertime. But so it goes. All right. So that is a wrap for this week's episode of Complimentary Cinema. Thank you for joining us. A link to this film will be below in our description. Please check it out if you like. Let us know in the comments how you feel about this film. Do you agree with us? Disagree? We don't care. We're not going to read any of these comments anyway, but please leave them. Engagement. Boost our engagement. And I guess we'll see you next week for another film. And have a great night.